The Zelkari ship materialized in Earth's orbit without warning, its crystalline hull reflecting the pale blue light of humanity's homeworld. Captain Vextar stood on the bridge, his four eyes scanning the primitive planet below with calculated interest. The intelligence reports had been clear. Humans were a young species, barely 3,000 cycles into their technological development. Perfect candidates for the collective's labor programs. "Begin the harvest," Vextar commanded, his translator converting his clicking mandibles into the ship's standard communication protocol. "Target population centers. We need at least 10,000 specimens." The Zelkari had perfected this process over millennia. They would descend upon developing worlds, capture the most capable individuals, and integrate them into their vast empire as workers, soldiers, or entertainment. Most species surrendered quickly once they understood the futility of resistance. The Zelkari possessed technology that could vaporize entire cities from orbit, fleets that spanned star systems, and weapons that could crack planets in half. Lieutenant Koreth activated the scanning arrays. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual electromagnetic signatures from the surface. The humans appear to have more advanced technology than our reports indicated." Vextar's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Impossible. Our scouts were thorough. These creatures haven't even achieved faster-than-light travel. Begin the extraction process." The first wave of Zelkari dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors. Each ship contained 50 soldiers equipped with neural disruptors, energy shields, and capture nets designed to incapacitate without killing. The cargo holds were spacious enough to hold hundreds of humans each. The ships targeted major population centers simultaneously: New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Appear suddenly, demonstrate overwhelming force, capture key individuals, and leave the remaining population too shocked and demoralized to resist. The first dropship touched down in Times Square at 2:47 p.m. local time. Hundreds of humans scattered as the crystalline vessel's doors hissed open. Zelkari soldiers emerged in perfect formation, their insectoid forms gleaming in the afternoon sun. They moved with mechanical precision, firing neural disruptors at fleeing civilians and activating their capture nets. Within minutes, they had subdued nearly 200 humans. The neural disruptors left the victims conscious but paralyzed, allowing for easy transport. Everything proceeded according to plan until the soldiers reached the edge of the square. A human in military fatigues stepped out from behind an overturned vehicle. Unlike the fleeing civilians, this one didn't run. Instead, he raised a primitive projectile weapon and fired 3 rapid shots at the nearest Zelkari soldier. The bullets struck the alien's energy shield and deflected harmlessly. The soldier turned toward the human with what could have been amusement. These primitives actually thought their crude weapons could penetrate Zelkari technology. But the human didn't retreat. Instead, he spoke into a small device attached to his collar. "This is Colonel Martinez, Manhattan Command. Confirm alien hostile contact. Weapons ineffective against energy shields. Recommend immediate escalation to Protocol 7. The Zelkari soldier approached confidently, neural disruptor raised. The human would be unconscious in moments, ready for processing. But as the alien closed the distance, the human smiled grimly and pulled a small metallic cylinder from his belt. "You picked the wrong species," Colonel Martinez said, pulling the pin from a white phosphorus grenade. The explosion tore through the square with devastating force. The white-hot chemical fire burned at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt through even Zelkari energy shields in seconds. The soldier's scream echoed across the electromagnetic spectrum as his exoskeleton liquefied. Similar scenes erupted across the globe as human military forces engaged the invaders. What the Zelkari had expected to be a simple harvesting operation quickly transformed into urban warfare. Humans emerged from buildings, sewers, and rooftops, wielding weapons that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective when employed with tactical brilliance. In London, British SAS operatives used shaped charges to collapse buildings on Zelkari soldiers. In Tokyo, Japanese self-defense forces deployed experimental plasma weapons that overloaded alien energy shields. In Mumbai, Indian forces used the city's complex underground network to launch coordinated ambushes. Back on the Zelkari command ship, alarms blared across every deck. Vextar stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. Half of his ground forces had been eliminated in less than an hour. The humans weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They were fighting back with a ferocity and coordination that defied every intelligence report. "Captain," Koreth reported, his voice trembling. "We're receiving communications from the human governments. They're demanding the immediate withdrawal of our forces and the return of all captured personnel." Vextar's mandibles clicked in dark amusement. "Demanding? From us." He activated the ship's communication array. "This is Captain Vextar of the Zelkari Collective. You will cease resistance immediately. We possess the power to destroy your entire world. Surrender now, and we will take only what we need." The response came within seconds, transmitted on every frequency simultaneously. The voice belonged to a human female, her tone cold and professional. "This is Secretary General Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Government. You have committed an act of war against humanity. You have 30 minutes to withdraw all forces from Earth and return our people. Failure to comply will result in the total annihilation of your fleet." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Vextar looked around at his crew, searching for some sign that they shared his disbelief. These primitives were threatening them? A species that hadn't even achieved interstellar flight was promising to annihilate a Zelkari battle fleet? "Sir," the communications officer reported nervously, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. The humans appear to be charging some kind of planetary defense system." Vextar activated his personal scanner and focused on the readings. What he saw made his compound eyes widen in shock. Hidden beneath Earth's surface, concealed by sophisticated masking technology, lay a network of weapons platforms unlike anything in Zelkari databases. The humans hadn't been primitive at all. They had been hiding their true capabilities, waiting for exactly this moment. And now, 30 minutes after their ultimatum, those weapons were powering up with the force of artificial suns. 28 minutes remained on the human ultimatum when the first weapons platform revealed itself. The Sahara Desert split open like a massive flower, sand cascading away to expose a gleaming array of crystalline focusing lenses, each the size of a city block. Similar installations emerged from the ocean floors, mountain ranges, and polar ice caps. Within seconds, Earth transformed from a seemingly defenseless world into a fortress bristling with weapons that made Zelkari technology look like stone tools. Captain Vextar frantically accessed the collective's databases, searching for any reference to such advanced defensive systems. The quantum computers processed terabytes of information in milliseconds, but returned only confusion and growing dread. These weapons operated on principles that shouldn't have been possible for a species of Earth's apparent development level. "Analysis complete, Captain," his science officer reported, her voice barely steady. "The humans are employing some form of zero-point energy manipulation. The power signatures suggest they can tap directly into quantum vacuum fluctuations. Each platform could theoretically generate enough energy to crack a moon in half." Vextar's four hearts hammered against his ribcage. Zero-point energy was theoretical even for the Zelkari, a technology their greatest scientists claimed might be achievable in another 1,000 cycles. Yet these humans, these supposedly primitive creatures, had not only mastered it, but weaponized it on a planetary scale. 15 minutes remaining, the communications officer announced unnecessarily. On the surface, the battle had shifted dramatically. Human forces withdrew from direct engagement with Zelkari soldiers, instead herding them into predetermined kill zones. Colonel Martinez coordinated the withdrawal from his temporary command post in a Manhattan subway station, watching feeds from cameras positioned throughout the city. "All units fall back to Phase 2 positions," he commanded. Let them think they're winning. Orbital weapons will be online in 14 minutes. The Zelkari soldiers, confused by the sudden cessation of human resistance, began regrouping in open areas to await extraction. They had suffered heavy casualties, but their training emphasized rapid reorganization and tactical flexibility. What they didn't understand was that the humans had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. Dr. Sarah Chun watched the proceedings from the Colorado Command Center 3 miles beneath Cheyenne Mountain. As the lead architect of Project Nemesis, she had devoted 30 years of her life to ensuring that humanity would never be caught defenseless. The orbital weapons were her masterpiece, but they were only the beginning. "Madam President," she said into her headset, "all Nemesis platforms report ready status. We can eliminate the alien fleet whenever you give a word." President Rebecca Martinez, Colonel Martinez's sister, stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by the Joint Chiefs and representatives from every major nation on Earth. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity had finally achieved true unity, but only in the face of an alien invasion. "Dr. Chun, what are our casualty projections if we proceed with Nemesis deployment?" "0 friendly casualties, Madam President. The platforms use focused gravitational lensing to direct energy with surgical precision. We can eliminate every alien ship while leaving our own people completely unharmed. However, once we reveal this technology, there's no going back. The galaxy will know that Earth is not the primitive world it appears to be." President Martinez nodded grimly. For generations, humanity had hidden its true capabilities behind a facade of technological inferiority. The masquerade had allowed them to develop in secret, while potential threats underestimated their capabilities. But the time for hiding was over. 10 minutes remaining. The communications officer announced aboard the Zelkari command ship. Vextar made his decision. "Begin emergency extraction of all ground forces. Prepare to withdraw to minimum safe distance." "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "our dropships are reporting difficulty achieving orbit. The humans have activated some kind of gravitational interference field. Our ships can barely maintain altitude." The captain's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. The humans had somehow managed to manipulate gravity itself, turning Earth's own gravitational field into a weapon. The dropships, designed to operate in standard gravitational environments, found themselves fighting against forces that shifted and pulsed with calculated precision. On the ground, Zelkari soldiers watched in growing panic as their extraction vessels struggled against invisible hands that seemed determined to drag them back to Earth's surface. Those ships that managed to reach low orbit found themselves trapped in gravitational eddies that prevented them from achieving escape velocity. 5 minutes remaining. Came the announcement that no one wanted to hear. Vextar opened a communication channel to the human command frequency. "This is Captain Vextar. We are attempting to comply with your demands, but our ships cannot achieve orbit. Your gravitational manipulation is preventing extraction of our forces." The response came immediately from Secretary General Vasquez, her voice as cold as the space between stars. "That is unfortunate, Captain. But your compliance period expires in 4 minutes and 37 seconds regardless of technical difficulties." "You cannot be serious," Vextar protested. "We are withdrawing. We will return your people and depart immediately if you allow our ships to function." "You misunderstand the situation," Vasquez replied. "This is not a negotiation. This is a demonstration. You attacked our world. You took our people. You threatened our species. The time for withdrawal has passed." Dr. Chen's fingers hovered over the activation controls for Project Nemesis. Each platform required biometric confirmation from 3 separate operators, a safeguard designed to prevent accidental activation. Around her, the other operators waited for a signal. 2 minutes remaining. Aboard the Zelkari command ship, panic spread through the crew like a virus. They were facing a species that possessed technology beyond their understanding, weapons that operated on principles their science couldn't explain, and a determination that seemed to border on madness. What kind of species developed planet-killing weapons and then used them without hesitation? The answer came from humanity's history, written in the blood of countless wars and conflicts. Humans were predators who had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain through cunning, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to surrender. They were a species that had turned warfare into an art form, that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing their enemies. And now, for the first time in their history, they had found enemies worthy of their full attention. 1 minute remaining. Vextar made a desperate gambit. We surrender. We formally surrender to human authority. Please, mercy. The reply came not from Secretary General Vasquez, but from a new voice. Cold, mechanical, and utterly without compassion. Surrender acknowledged. Terms: unconditional. Consequences: total. Welcome to war with humanity, Captain. You're about to learn why we don't negotiate with kidnappers. The countdown reached 0, and Earth's true face was finally revealed to the galaxy. The first Nemesis platform fired at precisely 3:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What had appeared to be an unremarkable section of the Sahara Desert became the focal point for humanity's most devastating weapon. Zero-point energy, harvested from the quantum foam that filled the vacuum of space, channeled through crystalline matrices that had taken decades to perfect. The beam that lanced upward from Earth's surface was invisible to the naked eye, but registered on every sensor in the solar system. It struck the nearest Zelkari dropship with surgical precision, and the vessel simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, it was converted back into its component atoms in the span of a single heartbeat. Captain Vextar watched his tactical display update in real time as 17 more dropships vanished in rapid succession. Each beam strike lasted exactly 0.3 seconds, just long enough to completely disintegrate a ship and its occupants. The platforms fired in sequence, methodically eliminating every Zelkari vessel in Earth's atmosphere. Impossible, he whispered, his translator struggling to process the complex emotions in his native language. No species could develop such technology in secret. But the humans had done exactly that. While the Zelkari had spent centuries refining their existing technology and expanding their empire, humanity had dedicated itself to a single goal: ensuring they would never be victims again. The scars of their own history, the countless wars and genocides that had marked their rise to dominance, had taught them a fundamental lesson that the Zelkari were only now beginning to understand. Peace was not the absence of war. Peace was the presence of overwhelming deterrence. Dr. Chen's voice echoed through the Colorado Command Center as she coordinated the orbital strike. Platform 7, eliminate target cluster Delta. Platform 12, focus on the command ship's escort formation. The Zelkari battle fleet, moments before an unstoppable force, now found itself caught in a web of destruction it couldn't comprehend. Ships that had served the collective for centuries were reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Weapons that could crack planets found themselves useless against enemies they couldn't target. Vextar's own vessel, the pride of the Zelkari fleet, shuddered as gravitational waves from Earth's weapons platforms washed over its hull. The ship's quantum crystalline armor, designed to withstand the direct impact of nuclear weapons, began to develop stress fractures under forces that shouldn't have been possible. "Captain," his science officer reported, her voice cracking with terror, "I'm detecting massive space-time distortions throughout the system. The humans aren't just using zero-point energy. They're manipulating the fundamental fabric of reality itself." On Earth's surface, Colonel Martinez coordinated the cleanup operation with the same methodical precision his sister had shown in the orbital strike. Zelkari soldiers who had been stranded by the destruction of their transports found themselves facing a species that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of war. Teams Alpha through Charlie begin containment operations, he commanded. "Remember, we want prisoners. Intelligence gathering is now our primary objective." The surviving Zelkari, isolated and leaderless, attempted to form defensive positions in the ruins of Times Square. Their energy weapons and personal shields made them formidable opponents, but humanity had anticipated this as well. Human forces approached using weapons specifically designed to counter Zelkari technology. Electromagnetic pulse grenades overloaded alien shields. Quantum disruptors interfered with their energy weapons. Most devastating of all were the neural inhibitors, devices that emitted specific frequencies designed to disrupt Zelkari brain functions based on decades of stolen biological data. The aliens had made a critical error. They had assumed that a species without faster-than-light travel couldn't possibly pose a threat to their technology. What they hadn't realized was that humanity had been reverse-engineering Zelkari equipment for over 50 years. The first contact hadn't happened 3 hours ago in Times Square. It had happened in 1973 when a Zelkari scout ship had suffered a mechanical failure and crashed in the Nevada desert. The crew had been recovered alive, and the United States government had made a decision that would shape the course of human history. Instead of announcing the discovery to the world, they had buried it in the deepest levels of classified research. The aliens had been studied, their technology analyzed, their biology dissected. When they eventually died in captivity, their ship had been disassembled piece by piece, and its secrets unlocked. Dr. Chen had been part of that research team. She had spent 30 years learning to think like a Zelkari engineer, understanding their technology well enough to develop countermeasures. The gravitational manipulation system hadn't been humanity's innovation. It had been theirs, stolen and improved upon by a species that had turned theft into an art form. "Sir," the communications officer aboard Vexstar's ship announced with barely controlled panic. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Collective Command. They're demanding a status report." Vexstar stared at the tactical display, showing the scattered remains of his once mighty fleet. How could he possibly explain this disaster to the Collective Council? How could he tell them that a supposedly primitive species had not only defeated their forces, but had done so with technology that seemed to be decades ahead of their own? "Tell them," he said slowly, "that we have encountered an unknown technological civilization masquerading as a developing species. Tell them that Earth is not what it appears to be." The reply from Collective Command came within minutes, transmitted across faster-than-light communication networks that spanned thousands of star systems. The message was brief and, to the point, impossible. Deploy Protocol 7. Eliminate the human species entirely. Protocol 7. The complete sterilization of a planet and its entire biosphere. It was the Collective's ultimate weapon, a process that would reduce Earth to a lifeless rock spinning through space. Vexstar had seen it used only twice before, against species that had proven too dangerous or too defiant to be absorbed into the Collective. But Protocol 7 required specific orbital positioning and at least 12 hours of preparation. With most of his fleet destroyed and the remainder trapped in gravitational fields, Vexstar lacked both the ships and the time necessary to implement the protocol. As if reading his thoughts, Secretary General Vasquez's voice filled the bridge once again. "Captain Vexstar, we have been monitoring your communications with your superiors. We are aware of Protocol 7 and its requirements. We are also aware that you currently lack the capability to implement it." Vexstar's 4 hearts stopped beating for a moment. The humans had been monitoring Collective communications? That should have been impossible. Their encryption systems were quantum-based, theoretically unbreakable. "You seem surprised," Vasquez continued. "You shouldn't be. We've had 50 years to study your technology, Captain. We know your ships better than you do. We know your weapons, your defenses, your tactics. Most importantly, we know your weaknesses." The captain's mandibles clicked rapidly as the implications sank in. The humans had been preparing for this confrontation for decades. Every aspect of their defense had been designed specifically to counter Zelkari capabilities. This wasn't a desperate last stand by a primitive species. This was an execution that had been planned for half a century. "However," Vasquez continued, "we are not without mercy. We will give you the same opportunity you gave us. Surrender unconditionally, and some of you may survive. Continue to resist, and you will discover exactly how thorough humans can be when we decide to eliminate a threat." The communication ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. Around him, Vextar could see his crew looking to him for guidance, for some sign that their captain had a plan that could salvage this disaster. But as he stared at the tactical display showing the remains of what had once been the most powerful fleet in Zelkari history, Vextar realized the truth that every aggressor throughout human history had eventually learned. They had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. The surrender came 18 hours after the first shot was fired. Captain Vextar transmitted the unconditional capitulation of all remaining Zelkari forces in the Sol system. But by then, humanity had already moved far beyond simple planetary defense. Deep space monitoring stations detected the approach of the Collective's revenge fleet while it was still 3 star systems away. Admiral Sarah Chun Dr. Chen's daughter and commanding officer of humanity's first interstellar fleet, stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. Around her, a battle group of 12 ships materialized like ghosts emerging from the void. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, incorporating 50 years of stolen Zelkari technology improved upon by minds that had been forged in the crucible of constant warfare. Sensor sweep complete, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Zelkari staging area confirmed. 237 vessels of various classifications. They appear to be preparing for a massive assault on Earth. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. The intelligence reports from the captured Zelkari had been thorough and terrifying. The Collective wasn't planning to simply invade Earth again. They intended to implement Protocol 7 on a scale never before attempted, using enough firepower to crack the planet's crust and boil away its oceans. Communications, open a channel to the Zelkari fleet. All frequencies. The response came immediately, transmitted in perfect Zelkari script across every communication band. Admiral Chun had spent 20 years learning to speak the alien language fluently, understanding that to truly defeat an enemy, you had to think like them. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Command. I am here to deliver a message to the Collective Council. You have 48 hours to withdraw all forces from human space and formally recognize Earth sovereignty. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your fleet. The reply came from High Commander Zekthar, the most decorated military leader in Collective history. His voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered hundreds of worlds and never known defeat. Unknown human vessel, you are outnumbered 200 to 1. Your primitive ships cannot possibly threaten a collective battle fleet. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Chun smiled coldly. High Commander, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here to threaten your fleet. We're here to eliminate it. Consider this a demonstration of human resolve. She turned to her weapons officer. Target the command ship with a gravitational lance. Full power. The UES Retribution had been designed around a single principle. Overwhelming firepower delivered with surgical precision. Its primary weapon was a scaled-up version of the planetary defense platforms, capable of generating zero-point energy beams that could punch through any known form of armor or shielding. The gravitational lance fired once, sending a pulse of twisted space-time across the 3 million kilometers separating the human ship from the Zelkari command vessel. High Commander Zekthar's flagship, a massive dreadnought that had served as the backbone of collective power for 2 centuries, folded in on itself and vanished. The silence that followed was profound. 236 Zelkari vessels hung motionless in space, their crews struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Their most powerful ship, protected by shields that could deflect stellar radiation and armor that had withstood direct hits from antimatter warheads, had been erased from existence by a single shot from a human vessel. High Commander Zekthar's ship has been destroyed, Admiral Chun announced calmly. The next shot will target your primary manufacturing facility. You now have 47 hours and 59 minutes to comply with our demands. But the Collective's response wasn't surrender. It was rage. The remaining Zelkari fleet opened fire simultaneously, filling space with energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and quantum disruptors. The combined firepower was enough to glass a continent, all focused on the small human fleet that had dared to challenge collective supremacy. The human ships didn't even attempt to evade. Instead, they activated defensive systems that the Zelkari had never seen before. Reality itself seemed to bend around the human vessels as gravitational shields deflected incoming fire into pocket dimensions that existed for microseconds before collapsing harmlessly. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The collective's weapons were impressive, but they were still based on conventional physics. Humanity had moved beyond such limitations decades ago, guided by their understanding of Zelkari technology and improved upon by minds that had spent centuries fighting impossible odds. "Return fire," she commanded. "Target their weapons platforms first. Let's show them what real firepower looks like." The human fleet opened fire as one. 12 ships unleashed a barrage of gravitational lances, quantum torpedoes, and reality-warping missiles that tore through the Zelkari formation like a scythe through wheat. Where human weapons struck, Zelkari ships didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, their matter converted directly into energy according to principles that the collective scientists insisted were impossible. Within 30 minutes, half the Zelkari fleet had been eliminated. The survivors found themselves trapped in gravitational fields that prevented them from jumping to hyperspace, forced to watch as their comrades were systematically destroyed by weapons that operated beyond their understanding. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Collective Council. They're requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations." Admiral Chun considered this for a moment. The Collective had existed for over 10,000 years, building their empire on the assumption that advanced technology automatically translated to military superiority. They had never encountered a species that could match their firepower while exceeding their strategic thinking. "Patch them through," she said finally. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of the Collective Council, 12 ancient beings representing the most powerful species in their empire. Their spokesman, a creature that resembled a cross between a spider and a tree, addressed her with obvious reluctance. "Admiral Chun, we are prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict. Surely some arrangement can be reached that satisfies both our species." Admiral Chin's expression didn't change. The terms were already stated. Complete withdrawal from human space and formal recognition of Earth sovereignty. Non négociable. "You cannot be serious," another council member interjected. "The collective spans thousands of star systems. We control resources beyond your comprehension. Surely you understand that continued conflict would be counterproductive for both our civilizations." "Counselor," Admiral Chun replied coldly, "you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. You seem to believe this is a negotiation between equals. It's not. This is a conquered species receiving terms from its conqueror." The council members exchanged glances that their translators couldn't properly convey. The concept of the collective being conquered was so alien to their thinking that they struggled to process it. "We have reinforcements coming from 12 sectors," the spokesman insisted. "Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. You cannot possibly defeat the full might of the collective." Admiral Chun smiled, and it was an expression that would have chilled the blood of anyone who understood what it meant. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized exactly how much prey was being delivered to its hunting ground. "Counselor," she said softly, "you're absolutely right. We can't defeat the full might of the collective." The council members began to relax, thinking they had finally made the human understand the futility of resistance. "We're going to eliminate it entirely," Admiral Chin continued. "Every ship, every station, every world that has participated in the collective's expansion. You see, you made one critical error in your calculations." "And what was that?" the spokesman asked. "You assumed we were like you. You assumed we were interested in conquest, in building an empire, in ruling over other species." Admiral Chin's smile widened, becoming something that belonged in humanity's darkest nightmares. We're not conquerors, counselor. We're exterminators. And you just made yourselves extinct. The transmission ended, and Admiral Chun turned back to the tactical display. The remaining Zelkari ships were attempting to flee, but the gravitational fields held them fast. Around the solar system, more human fleets were dropping out of hyperspace, each one carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Humanity had kept one final secret from their captives, one piece of information that would have changed everything if the collective had known it. The crashed ship in 1973 hadn't been the first contact. It had been the most recent in a series of encounters spanning decades. Humanity had been preparing for this war for over a century, building fleets in hidden shipyards scattered throughout unexplored space, developing weapons that operated on principles the collective couldn't imagine. They had turned their entire species into a weapon specifically designed to destroy the galactic empire that had marked them for extinction. And now, finally, it was time to pull the trigger. The war that followed wasn't really a war at all. It was an extermination campaign conducted with a methodical precision that had made humanity the dominant species on Earth. Within 6 months, the collective's military forces had been completely destroyed. Within a year, their civilian infrastructure had been systematically dismantled. Within 18 months, the empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia existed only in historical records. Admiral Chun stood in the ruins of the collective capital city on Zelker Prime, watching as human engineers worked to dismantle the last of the quantum communication arrays. The planet's population had surrendered unconditionally 3 weeks earlier, but humanity wasn't interested in occupying their former territories. They had a different plan entirely. Final count, Admiral, her aide reported. 1,743 star systems liberated. Over 9,000 species freed from collective control. The galaxy is essentially empty of organized military resistance. Admiral Chen nodded, but felt no satisfaction in the numbers. Victory had come so easily that it barely qualified as a challenge. The collective's technology had proven inferior to human innovations at every level. Their strategy had been predictable, their tactics outdated, their leadership paralyzed by the impossibility of what they were facing. What about the relocation program? Proceeding on schedule. The Zelkari survivors are being relocated to the Kepler 442 system as requested. It's isolated enough that they won't interfere with other species, but the planet is capable of supporting their population. They'll have everything they need to rebuild their civilization, assuming they learn from their mistakes. Admiral Chen almost smiled at that. The humans weren't genocidal monsters, despite what their enemies believed. They had offered every species in the collective the same choice: accept relocation to suitable worlds where they could develop independently, or continue fighting and face complete extinction. Most had chosen relocation. The Zelkari had been among the last to surrender, fighting desperately to hold onto their homeworld even after their fleet had been reduced to scrap metal. It had taken the destruction of their 3 largest cities before they finally understood that humanity wasn't bluffing about total annihilation. Admiral, her communications officer called out, "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Martinez wants to speak with you personally." The holographic display activated, showing President Rebecca Martinez in the rebuilt Oval Office. Behind her, Admiral Chun could see the lights of Washington, D.C., fully restored after the initial Zelkari attack. Humanity had proven as efficient at rebuilding as they were at destroying. "Admiral Chun," the president said, "I wanted to congratulate you personally on the completion of Operation Clean Slate. The galaxy has been successfully pacified. All hostile forces have been eliminated or relocated. Most importantly, the threat to Earth has been permanently removed." "Thank you, Madam President. But I have to ask, what happens now? We've essentially become the sole military power in the known galaxy. That's a responsibility I'm not sure we're prepared for." President Martinez smiled, but it was the tired expression of someone who had spent years making impossible decisions. "That's exactly why we're prepared for it, Admiral. We never wanted to be conquerors. We just wanted to be left alone. Now that we've eliminated the threats to our independence, we can go back to being what we've always been: explorers." Admiral Chen frowned. Explorers? The galaxy is full of species that spent centuries under collective rule. Admiral. They've forgotten how to be independent, how to make their own decisions, how to determine their own destinies. We're going to help them remember. The plan that President Martinez outlined was ambitious beyond anything the collective had ever attempted. Instead of ruling over the liberated species, humanity would serve as mentors and protectors, helping them rebuild their civilizations according to their own cultural values and desires. Human fleets would patrol the galaxy, ensuring that no new empires arose to threaten the independence of developing worlds. It was a role that suited humanity perfectly. They had always been teachers as much as warriors, spreading knowledge and culture wherever they went. The difference now was that they had the power to ensure their lessons were heard. There's one more thing, President Martinez continued. The collective kept extensive records on every species they encountered, including many that they considered too primitive to bother with. We've identified over 3,000 worlds with developing civilizations that were marked for future harvesting. We're going to make sure that never happens. Admiral Chun understood the implications immediately. Humanity was taking on the role of galactic guardians, protecting species that couldn't yet protect themselves. It was a massive undertaking that would require generations to complete, but it was also the logical evolution of human philosophy. They had always been a species that protected the weak and defended the innocent. Now, they had the power to do so on a galactic scale. Admiral, her aide interrupted. Sensors are detecting an incoming ship. Configuration unknown, but it's not using any technology in our databases. Admiral Chun activated her personal scanner and studied the readings. The ship was small, barely the size of a Zelkari fighter, but its energy signature was unlike anything she had seen before. More importantly, it was broadcasting what appeared to be a first contact protocol in a language that wasn't in any human database. New contacts, she mused. I wonder if they're friendly. The ship approached slowly, clearly aware of the massive human fleet surrounding Zelka Prime. When it was within communication range, it transmitted a simple message in broken Standard Galactic. Please, help. Collective, taking our people. Admiral Chun sighed and activated her communication array. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Command. The collective has been eliminated. Your people are safe. We're here to help. The reply came immediately, filled with an emotion that transcended language barriers. Really? Collective gone? We free? Yes, Admiral Chen replied, feeling the satisfaction that had eluded her during the war. You're free. We all are. As she watched more ships emerge from hyperspace, refugees, explorers, species that had hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy for centuries, Admiral Chen realized that humanity had accomplished something unprecedented. They hadn't just won a war. They had liberated an entire galaxy. The age of empires was over. The age of independence had begun. And at its heart stood humanity, the species that had turned kidnapping into genocide, but had also turned conquest into liberation. They were no longer the hunted. They were the guardians. And they would make sure that no species ever again faced the choice between slavery and extinction. The galaxy was finally free, and humanity would make sure it stayed that way. Not through conquest or domination, but through the one thing that had always defined them as a species, the absolute refusal to compromise when the stakes were survival itself. Some species negotiated. Some species surrendered. Some species adapted. Humans annihilated threats to their existence, and then built something better from the ashes. It was a lesson the galaxy would never forget.